Before year end and our next steps, the window dressing will be put on the final document, make it something more pleasing to the eye, that as you look at it, it doesn't seem to be a daunting task. After the year-end holidays, this guidance document will be presented to the membership, both of EDPA and of ESCA, asking for member comment, which means you have to read it. We're going to ask you to mentally think through the implementation. What would it take for me to do this within my company? And then think of the 35, 55, 75, and 95. And by the way, we didn't do that on every single requirement. Maybe about 20, 25% of the requirements have those 4 tiers. Others are just simply, this is highly recommended, you may do this, you can do this. And we think this guidance is going to continue to evolve. Market conditions will change, products will change. That will make us all more sustainable, and we'll revisit, revise, and reissue. Next, we have to have some education and information sessions. We will run webinars. They can either be mass attended, or you may want to have a custom bespoke presentation within your company, specific to what type of company that is. At Exhibitor Live in February, we've been asked to do a half-day workshop for the exhibiting companies to inform them what we're doing as the suppliers to exhibiting companies. And here's what you as exhibiting companies are now capable of asking from your supply chain so that you as an exhibiting company can be more green, can be less in terms of your carbon footprint, and stay within your carbon budget. We'll have EDPA representatives, ESCA representatives, and Maritz had me do a carbon footprint calculation of their exhibiting at IMEX. We're doing a case study to the exhibitors. Here's how you can do a carbon footprint calculation of your exhibiting as but one booth at a show. In conclusion, this is a little bit of the religion. Sustainability is important to the exhibitions industry because it helps to ensure the well-being of the current and the future generations. I think you all buy into that. It reduces the impact of human activities on the environment. We could buy into that. It improves the quality of life for human beings and the diversity of life on Earth. You probably can buy into that. Do you buy into the next one? In other words, it's going to impact your bottom line. It will impact the bottom line. The EDPA has this mission now, this philosophy, that it believes in fostering a community of environmentally conscious business working together to create a sustainable future for generations to come. That's the mantra that's coming from EDPA and ESCA. This is what we want to have happen. And this guidance project is demonstrative of that belief. Let's open it up for questions.
Can you talk a little bit about the difficulty to measure some of this? Throughout your presentation, you would say 35% for this and calculate this. But it seems like there could be multiple ways to calculate some of this stuff. Will there be ways or guidance as to say, this is how you might calculate this number, or consistency amongst those, or are companies going to kind of be on their own to figure out how to measure some of that?
Yes, that was an issue. It's the square footage of the structure. That's what we're using as the base. Not the footprint, not a 10 by 10, but the actual square footage of the structure itself. That's what we're going to use as the baseline to then say, okay, of that is 35% of it, whatever the criteria happens to be in that case. But yes, that was discussed.
In addition to designing and building trade shows, our company also designs and builds museum exhibits. Would this cover that, or are you aware of another entity that is looking at sustainability in that industry?
Net zero carbon events, the key word is events. I also sit on 25639, which is the vocabulary for the events industry. And they've decided to use the 2 words in tandem everywhere, exhibitions and events. They used to have it exhibitions and conventions, conventions, conferences, trade shows. It's now going to be exhibitions and events. So yes, this applies to exhibitions and events, as does net zero.
First of all, this has been great. I know a lot of people that I've been speaking with have been looking for this. I think the question on all of our mind is the impact on creativity, the cost impact on bottom line, who monitors it, who polices it. I mean, there's a lot of questions, but this is it's that crawl, walk, run approach, right? Talking with the people that were on the committee, do you have any sense of what the cost impact is on a respective business to adapt some of the process?
Yeah, I'll give you an answer, but there are some of you in the room who are on the working group who can also answer that question. But I've been told two things: that the price of sustainable materials is dropping. Now, either that's because volume demand has gone up and supply and demand, people are manufacturing more of this stuff than they did 3 years ago, pre-COVID, but prices are dropping. And then the other bit I hear quite often is how they have converted that into savings so that it's not a cost center, but it's a cost savings. But any other working groups in the audience here today that can talk about your practical experience in being more sustainable? And while he's doing that, I want to acknowledge those of us who were on the working committee: Joe Guerrero from Aluvision, Jim Obermeyer from Bray Leno, obviously Dasher was involved, Jason Popp from Moss, Brian Kaltzis from AGAM, Edwin Vandervene from B-Metrics, Nicole Klein at Exhibit Expressions, Tom Beard from Classic Exhibits, William Kruger from Taylor Corporation, Al Mercuro from Genesis Exhibits, and in China, Arthur Zhang from Thornhope. And then we had invited guests that were on the ESCA side: Nick Cordaro from LEVE, Julie, of course, and Patrick Putzer from Emerald Carpets. Those were your representatives that were working on this.
Well, not really a question as much as just an answer for it, because Brian from AGAM, as part of the group, when we talked about the cost that would be involved, there's certain things in the document, and the document is not, you have to do everything there. You can look at parts and pieces to summarize and say, hey, we're fulfilling it because we're hitting portions of it. So there are some recyclable products that you might look at and go, hey, if my customer doesn't value this, it doesn't make sense. The part about the reduce, reuse, if you're reusing panels, if you're doing sustainable carpeting, there's different things that you can kind of pick and choose some. So we said, in general, to be able to hit the standards, the cost should not be high. It might be a few percentage points over what you do now, but it's not exponential.
Thank you. Anybody else?
In addition to the guidelines that you guys are putting forth, are you putting together maybe a guide or a resource center that we can tap into as exhibit houses or as producers to vendors who are already producing sustainable materials? I know there's a number of them out there. They do it in their own marketing campaigns to us, but is there going to be a central location that we can access information?
I would say the answer to that is yes, but for two reasons. One, for example, Net Zero Carbons Initiative is now working on an exhaustive list of materials and then basically rating them in terms of their reuse and recyclability. We decided not to do that because they're doing it, and they expect to have it out sometime in December, maybe as late as early January. When that's out, we're going to get the group back together again and say, okay, we should be including this in our group. I know Nicole Klein was very anxious, as she said to us, I can't wait for us to have the tools. This project kind of ends at the deliverable of, okay, here's the best guidance document, distribute it, public comment, we'll tweak it. The next generation of the project might be, okay, what resources do we need to create to help people take this journey?
Yeah, just wondering if you were going to be asking businesses to commit to a net zero target date to sign up to as part of this initiative.
In the journey, we recommend that they take the Net Zero Carbon Pledge, not a requirement. Net Zero Carbon Initiative, look it up, Google it, go out there. You can sign on. There's over 600 companies now, and I think something like 30 countries that have signed up to the Net Zero Carbon Events Pledge, which effectively is you cut your emissions by 50% by 2030 and you're net zero by 2050. In order to do that, you need to know what your baseline is. You know what 50% of that is that you're supposed to reduce by 2030. There's a lot of focus now on how are we going to get from 23 to 30. I don't think there's enough yet on how are we going to get from 30 to 50 to 2050. I think they're kind of saying, let's tackle this now, not boil the ocean. And when we get to 2030, wherever we are, we'll now have to put a roadmap together to get us to 2050 when we expect to be net zero. And folks, net zero means zero. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm at a figure and I'm going to buy offsets to reduce that figure to get me down to zero. No, that's not net zero. In the net zero program, you can buy offsets up until 2030. But after 2030, we're to be focused on getting to net zero, not using offsets to get us to zero. Question?
Just a last comment. Glenn, thank you. You know, as a member of the committee, I'm just going to try to get the last word in here and make a pitch to all of you. We've got a lot of business owners in the audience. We need to hear from you, and so I want to underline what Glenn said. We want the industry to look at this, to respond to it. I know it can sometimes seem like alphabet soup, but you're the protagonists here. You know your businesses. We really need detailed feedback when this comes out for it to be useful, for it to be pragmatic, and for it to make a difference. So I would just urge you to spend some time on this, to engage with it. If you've got questions, Glenn went through who your committee members are for EDPA. Ask us, and we'll be happy to take you through it.
I do want to say it was a pleasure working with the representatives both from EDPA and ESCA to get this done. Like I said, we started in August, and here we are pretty much end of November, and we're pretty much done. And everyone did a great job volunteering of their time, and it tied in very well with the sentiment that was expressed by Chris about how this was a family. And I could say, as an outsider, I definitely felt that, and I felt very welcomed and warmed, and I appreciate the effort that you've all given the opportunity to me. Thank you.